Hello and welcome back to the virtual classroom. I'm your host, Dr. Olmsted. As you can see, today's topic is discussion boards. This is a how-to video on kind of the reasons why I am so big on discussion boards, as well as how you can succeed. So let's get this started off the way, right off the bat. Why do I have to do discussion boards? Look, I get it. A lot of instructors nowadays use discussion boards, especially since the COVID pandemic hit. I understand a lot of you all are kind of just over it. You're tired of them. You see them as a busy work assignment. However, hear me out, please. I firmly believe in discussion boards. I believe they are vitally important to not only this class, but to your college experience. So I want to spend a couple brief moments explaining why I am so big on them, and then explain how to do well on them. So first things first, why do I do them? Well, first and foremost, it allows me to put primary sources in your hands. Now, occasionally some secondary sources as well, but primarily I'm going to give you primary sources. Now, there's a whole long discussion about how I feel about this. Now, I'm going to save you from most of it. But the short version, the too long didn't read version of it, is that students don't often get to read primary sources. That is, documents written in the era in which we're talking about. And if they do, they don't make a lot of sense because they have no context for understanding why they're reading them. So my goal is always in class, while I will use some primary source quotes during lecture, I tend to like to kind of provide an overview of what's going on historically in that era during lecture, and then allow students to read those primary sources for some depth of knowledge when it comes to the discussion boards. So it's getting those extra documents in your hands. That's invaluable to me. Secondly, I've learned over the years that students kind of suck when it comes to interpreting primary source documents. And that's not a knock against students, it's that you've never been taught how to. And so for me, this is practice. This is a practice opportunity that you can explore in how to interpret information presented to you. Sometimes the language is not easy to understand. Sometimes you have to look for ulterior motives. Sometimes you have to look for biases. Sometimes you need to compare and contrast two seemingly competing sources. And this is something that I find students struggle with when it comes time to do like a section assignment or a research paper, that they will present a narrative of what happened, but never take time to analyze why and how it happened or its impact. And going along with that, this is a low stakes opportunity to practice interpretation and analysis of documents. You see, what happens most often in history classes or other college courses is that you're assigned a research paper. Here, go do some research, find some sources, and good luck. And they're often not the greatest of papers. And so every week, most every week, I'm giving you this opportunity to practice with a very low stakes weighted grade. Each of the discussion boards is worth less than 20 overall points on a 1,000-point scale. And thus, you get the chance to make mistakes. And quite honestly, as long as you make a concerted effort, I don't penalize you heavily if you interpret something wrong. Again, as long as you're giving a concerted effort and not just phoning it in. And lastly, this is certainly not least, this is vitally important as well, is what I find in classes over the years is that there are always one or two, maybe if I'm lucky, 3 students who will answer every question in class I ask. Now, as a professor, I love it. Those students I love them because they will always respond to me. which makes class more fun. The problem is with that is that the rest of the class only gets to hear the opinions or thoughts of those 1, 2, maybe 3 people all semester long. And the reality is, each of you have a story. Each of you have an interpretation. Each of you brings something different due to your ethno-racial, cultural, class backgrounds. Each of you brings something new to the history table, and thus, when each of you read a document, you will see things a little bit differently based upon your experience. And that's awesome. That's what history is about understanding history, ideas, and events through new lenses and new ideas. That's what we want. But in a normal classroom, a lot of students just don't talk for whatever reason. Some are shy, some are introverts, some are afraid of being wrong, some just are tired and don't want to be there. Discussion boards. This means that every week I will get 16, 18, 25, 30 of you, depending on the size of the class, different opinions. And yeah, some of you will overlap and be very similar, but there will always be those who have differing opinions. And those are the greatest things ever as an instructor to read. And so this allows me and allows you all to have diversity of opinion. And because I not only make you write an initial post, but also responded to classmates, I am forcing you to read the opinions of others. That's the point. I want you to see what other people think, how they think, and why they think it. Now, that's why we do them. That's why I believe in them. Now, to do well on these, there's a couple of things you need to do. First of all, by the due date on Blackboard, you need to post an initial post. In other words, you need to read the documents and respond to the prompt question. If you do that, it's worth up to 70 points. Then, by the date on Blackboard, you need to respond to classmates. In other words, you need to read what other people write and make a response post. Each of those response posts is worth up to 15 points for a total of 100, up to 100. And again, the response post, which there's more details on Blackboard, cannot simply be, I like it, or you suck, or I agree completely with what you said. No, you need to carry on a conversation. Think of it like a chat board, not just simply, I like this, but rather, what can you add to the conversation? What other source can you bring in? What other idea can you bring in to carry on a conversation? It should be something that someone can respond to with not simply like, thank you. It should be, I never saw it that way before. That's an interesting thought. Did you think about this? Again, it's not necessarily critiquing their grammar. It's not critiquing their use of examples. That's my job. Your job is to carry on the conversation, and contradict is fine. Bring something new. Take it a different direction. That's all good. Now, as far as the initial post, though, I want to give you a basic format. So we're going to take an example here. And again, I can't do it exact because we don't have the time to read through the primary sources. But let me give an example here. Let's just say the prompt was, to what extent was the gay rights movement successful during the 1970s? This is a possible prompt. So there's your prompt. You have it. You need to read through the documents I've provided on Blackboard, and then you need to formulate your response. Now, the basic format is about 6 to 8 sentences. Again, that's a full body paragraph. Again, this is the basic format for most discussion board posts, initial posts. Now, there are a few where I will ask you for like first person, as in pretend you're an immigrant in the 1890s. There are some that will say, hey, write a letter to the editor of the newspaper. And again, do a first person kind of letter. There are some I'll ask for what's called Twitter style responses, where you have to create screen name handles and then write a back and forth conversation. Think of a internet chat board or a comment section where you're responding back to each other and creating a fictitious conversation back and forth. There are those, but the majority of them are going to be simply questions like this where you need to analyze the documents. Now, the basic format for this is a topic sentence, evidence, explain. So if the prompt was, to what extent was the gay rights movement successful during the 1970s? Your response, first of all, needs to have a topic sentence. It should be argumentative and it should answer the question. So, for instance, here's a sample response. The gay rights movement was partially successful in the 1970s, though they did not achieve all their goals. Remember, to what extent means doesn't all or nothing. It's not simply a yes or no. It means that they mostly did, or they partially did, or they somewhat did, or they almost achieved them all. Make a nuance, make an argument. So there's your topic sentence. Then you now need to add evidence to support this. And this is what you get from reading the documents I assign. So add evidence and explanation. So for example, homosexuals were able to advance their cause following the Stonewall Uprising by being more open society. So I'll give an example, explain what it did. As a result, they formed new organizations throughout the country to bring awareness, such as the GLBT here in Houston. Again, another example. In addition, they were successful in lobbying the APA to remove homosexuality from the list of mental disorders or mental diseases. Again, another example of success. Despite their success, so here, this is the nuance. Despite their successes, some, like Anita Bryant, pushed back against the so-called gay agenda. Also, in the 1980s, they faced more pushback due to the AIDS epidemic that was, at first, considered a gay disease, with one government official stating that it was God's punishment for their sexual deviation. Now again, I studied the document where it came from. Now this could have been a direct quote from Pat Robertson. It could have just been a paraphrase, which is what I did here. Then I go on to say, in response, the gay community came together on AIDS education through groups like ACT UP, again, another example. And then finally, in 2013, they were able to achieve the inclusive status marker of legalized gay marriage. Thus, while they do not achieve all their goals in the 1970s, they did make significant advances. So then you put it all together and you finalize with it, set the stage for advance in subsequent decades. This is what you would then copy and paste into Blackboard discussion as your initial post that some other student would then read and then respond to and say, well, yeah, I understand what you're saying here. I like the examples you gave, but did they really get to achieve even partial of their goals? You know, I see them as achieving far fewer because we also had the don't ask, don't tell policy in the 1990s. And we see it under attack now, possibly again, as an overreach of the Supreme Court in Obergefell versus Hodges. In other words, you can bring more to the discussion. That's the point of discussion boards. Now, again, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, obviously reach out to me. I will talk with you. I will explain it again in a different way if need be. But the basic premise is you need to have a topic sentence. You need to have evidence. You need to explain and analyze. This is practice because this is what you need to do then for the larger section assignment essays. These are essentially body paragraphs of a larger essay. You are practicing low stakes with feedback from your cohort, from your other students in your class, your classmates, without being harshly graded by me. You practice here, and then when you do on the section assignment, that's my turn to grade them and give you feedback. So you practiced here, you perform on the section assignments. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. But until next time, take care and bye-bye.